Here we go, recording. Hello, everybody. Hello, my wonderful friend, Gregg Braden. Welcome to Conversations with Gregg Braden, one of the most fun things that I do in my whole year. And I'm excited that you're here with me again, Gregg, my spiritual brother. And for those of you who may be new to these conversations, our yearly conversations, I just want to say just a little bit about Gregg, that he is a 5-time New York Times best-selling author. He's a researcher, an educator, a lecturer, and he's internationally renowned as a pioneer for bridging science, ancient wisdom, and human potential. That's what we need, all those parts. And between 1979 and 1990, Gregg worked as a problem solver during times of great crisis for the Fortune 500 companies, and he continues solving problems today as he merges that modern science and ancient wisdom of our past, of the indigenous past, our past, into real world solutions in the issues that challenge our lives today. And we seem to have a few of those. His research has led him to 12 award-winning books, now published in over 40 languages. So there's no stopping this guy. Gregg has presented his discoveries in over 30 countries and 6 continents, and has been invited to speak at the UN, Fortune 500 companies, the US military. And like our dear friend together, Lee Carroll, Gregg is listed in the United Kingdom's Watkins Journal, and he's among the top 100 of the world's most spiritually influential living people for the 5th consecutive year. So I'm glad you're living for the 5th consecutive year, Gregg, and more. And you're also a 2020 nominee for the prestigious Templeton Award, and this has been several years for you. So that Templeton Award is for honoring outstanding individuals who have devoted their talents to expanding our vision of human purpose and ultimate reality. So, Gregg, we're here because we're not going to be in Boulder. And I am so grateful that you have decided to come and have a conversation with me today about, let's just see. And for those of you watching, please know that it is my great honor to call this man my friend. I look at you, Gregg, as a devoted, dedicated, passionate person to what you do to make the world a better place, to help us get along in the world and get better. Mr. Warm, witty, and wonderful Gregg Braden.
Oh, Amber, I don't know where I go from there. Thank you. Thank you. I especially like the part about the awards being given to living people. It's always good to have that affirmation. I wake up in the morning, I'm pretty sure I'm alive. It's good to know that the awards think so as well. But I have to tell you, there's an organization that wants to do a Lifetime Achievement Award for me, and I declined. I said, you can't give me a Lifetime Achievement Award because I'm not done yet. It's not over yet, So, hey, Amber, thank you for those kind words. Thank you for having me on the program again. I want to know where you are right now, because I would like to be in the place that it's so beautiful. That background is so beautiful. Where are you coming from today?
I am coming from Tucson, Arizona, where I spend 3 seasons of the year. And I actually took this photograph here. The desert skies, as you know, are beautiful. And our high temperature today will be 80 degrees Fahrenheit, low of 50. So perfect weather.
Wow. Well, I would like to be there. I am coming from, I'm in the studio. I'm actually filming for a series this week on ancient civilizations. This is the ancient civilization set. And I'm in a studio just outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico, your neighbor. Wow. We've got a little bit different weather. We're higher elevation. The high today, I think, is 28 Fahrenheit. And we cannot see the mountains because I think it's snowing on the mountains right now. So it's a good day for us to be together. Amber, I am a man who is honored to follow the lead of a woman in this dance that we're doing together. So where would you like to go with our conversation? I'm happy to follow your lead.
Well, thank you. As everyone watching and listening knows, our world has been turned upside down a
Hmm.
couple of times, and we're not done yet since March. And those of us who are road warriors like you, Greg, we've completely changed the way that we bring information to people, for worse or for better, in many, many respects. And not just that, but how our world is being touched right now and what it means in a greater capacity for all of us to live and to thrive, and not just feel like we're always in survival mode and looking over our shoulder, and how much worse can it get, and when is it going to get better, and all of those things. We have
Yeah.
we have a lot of choices we can make right now individually, and I would love for you to address that.
Hmm. So my first question, I'm just listening to your words. So if the world's been turned upside down twice, does that mean that we're now right side up?
Yeah, right now anyway.
Right now. Amber, the world is changing. And that's no secret. Your world is changing. My world is changing. Our viewers' world is changing. Many people have been caught off guard. They've been surprised by the changes. And there are many people that have not been surprised, because in our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions, those who have come before us had a very, very different perspective and a very different view of time than what we have been led to embrace. In our modern world, we've been led to think of time as linear, and we've been led to think of civilization, climate, society as static. So 1940s, 1950s, right after the end of the Second World War, there were systems that were put in place, and those systems have served us to the degree that they have, right, wrong, good, or bad. And what's happening now is that our world is changing because we live in a dynamic world. It is a dynamic system. Climate is dynamic. Nature is dynamic. Economies are dynamic. Politics are dynamic. Societies are dynamic. The cosmos is dynamic. Earth's magnetic fields are dynamic. Our relationship to the sun is dynamic. And our ancestors somehow understood this. They were not scientists necessarily in the way we think of formalized science today. We say that science began, what we call the modern scientific method, about 300 years ago, when Isaac Newton formalized the laws of physics. But scientific principles were being used long before that. And our ancestors understood our relationship to the world around us and to the cosmos in ways that we're only beginning to understand. And it's largely because they stepped back, they looked at the big picture, and they were systems thinkers. They saw the universe and our lives as part of an integrated system, whereas we have compartmentalized those. We've been conditioned to compartmentalize those. So as a scientist, I'm a product of that, and I've had to work to overcome that conditioning. So for example, I was taught as a scientist to think in little boxes. So here's a box of geology, and I am a degreed geologist. Here's a box of biology, and I've got a strong background in life sciences. Here's a box of mathematics. Here's a box of physics and chemistry and astronomy and history and archaeology. We're taught to compartmentalize these so that we're comfortable with them. Our ancestors didn't make those separations. And they also did not separate what we call science from spirituality, from art, from everyday living. They didn't make those distinctions. For them, the act of creating something was a spiritual experience. But here's where the science comes in. It is the experience of the person who beholds the creation, the person that looks at the art, that looks at the sculpture, that looks at what has been created. When we look at something and it changes the way we feel, that is a chemical reaction happening in our body. We have the ability to change in the presence of beauty, and our ancestors understood all of these things. So I'm just giving some examples here. So they have told us for a very long time, based upon their understanding of cycles, that in our lifetime, we would live the convergence of a number of cycles. And in that convergence, that our world would change and that we would be forced to change the way we think about ourselves to thrive in the new world. And that's precisely what we're seeing right now. We are witnessing a rare convergence of multiple cycles. Some we're familiar with, climate cycles we're familiar with. There are natural rhythms that would occur whether we were here or not. We have contributed to some of those rhythms through industry, but if no humans were on Earth, the geology tells us these cycles were occurring for over 500,000 years before we ever showed up on the Earth. So we have to say we didn't cause the cycles. So they knew that climate cycles were converging now. Economic cycles are converging. And when we talk about economies, a lot of times people think about money. And it's not about money, it's about relationships. Economies are really about human relationships and how we share vital resources that we need every day in our lives: food, energy, water, medicine, communication, security. I've been with indigenous communities who have beautifully successful economies, and there is no money exchanged. It just happens in our Western economy. We do include money. So we are living the convergence of a shift in an economic cycle. And another cycle that many people are surprised to hear is a cycle of human conflict. Human conflict is not sporadic, it's not random, it's not spontaneous. It follows very precise rhythms that are closely linked to solar cycles. US military knows this, governments around the world know this, because these cycles determine levels of social coherence and social incoherence. When the magnetic fields of the Earth related to the sun, when the sun goes through its solar cycles and it influences Earth's magnetics, those influence our hearts, the neurons in our hearts. And the bottom line, the formula is when the magnetics are weak, which they are right now, the weakest point that they have been in this cycle, we are less willing to cooperate. We are more aggressive. When the magnetics are stronger, it's just the opposite. So we're living the perfect storm of all of these cycles converging. So for those who have embraced the wisdom of our past, the changes that you're talking about don't come as a surprise. For those who have discounted the significance of the wisdom of our ancestors, they're looking around right now and it looks like the world is falling apart at the seams. And that can be a very frightening prospect. So I'm going to stop before I want to talk about what we can do to remedy that. But I just want to ask, Amber, we covered a lot of ground, and you mentioned that there may be some people viewing who are new. So if you were a new person listening to what I just said, did I leave something out, or did it make sense to you what it is that I just said?
Thank you for that, Greg. And I love what you just said, because it really puts an umbrella on things, and it doesn't give us the feeling that, there's a random this and a random that, and that these cycles are much bigger than us in our little world with our planners and our, whatever, all of that cycles, and that we're part of a cycle in, our birth and our death and our reproduction. And I think it's interesting to think about. You said convergence, and I thought back to 1987 and the harmonic convergence. And how do you feel that history will see that, like from 1900 to 2100?
Sure.
Yeah.
What's the way that question comes to me often is people say, when's it going to stop? When's the craziness going to stop? If you think back, and we all remember 2012 and the craziness around the year 2012. And the craziness was because of people who were simply not informed. I'm not going to say that they were devious in any way, but a lot of the media ridiculed the 2012 phenomenon because they were uninformed. They didn't understand and they tend to go for, shock headlines and extremes. But the 2012 phenomenon was based on the indigenous Mayan, as well as the Aztec later, the Aztec, what's called the Mesoamerican calendar. There is no single Mesoamerican calendar. It is a system of interlocking cycles with such precision. We've never seen this kind of precision until the computers of the 20th century. We still don't know how the Mayans knew about these solar cycles, nested cycles within cycles, and our relationship to the cycles. But this is one of the cycles that indicated that we would be living this, the convergence that we're talking about right now. So December 21st, 2012 happened. Everybody was saying, okay, nothing happened. Okay, I guess we just go back to living the way we've always lived. And I remember I was doing an interview not long after that, and the interviewer said to me, Greg, it's past 2012, when are these big changes going to happen? What all the stuff you were talking about. I did an interview with him recently, and he looked back at that and he said, when are the changes going to stop? So here's the answer to this question. What the Mayans told us about this convergence of cycles, these are natural rhythms that change the world around us. And in the presence of the change in the world around us, we have to make adjustments within us. We have to find the place within us where we maybe hone our perceptions a little bit. Or if for the belief systems that have served us in the past, that no longer serve us, let those go and embrace new belief systems. And our ancestors knew this, and what they said, they literally said, you will not recognize your world, you will not recognize yourself as you go through these changes. So when does the change happen? The Mayans calculated roughly 5,000 year cycles, 5125. And they were based on what's called the precession of the equinoxes. It's a large cosmological cycle, approximately, but it's between 24 and 26,000. It's not a precise number. It's between 24 and 26,000, roughly 25,000. And so they divided that big cycle into 5,000 year cycles that they called great world ages. And it's no secret to them or those that study them that we are living the close of a great world age. Well, the world age, because it's based on cosmological cycles, it doesn't stop in a heartbeat. It doesn't stop on a dime. There is a buffer of time that can be calculated. And that buffer of time is 18 years. It's a 36-year long buffer. 18 years before 2012, 18 years after 2012. And the 18 years after 2012 happens to be the year 2030. And I think it's no accident that so many look at 2030 as some kind of a landmark, some kind of a pivotal moment in time, including the United Nations, who have developed what are called the SDG 2030 parameters, policies, the SDG Sustainable Development Goals for 2030, a list of 17 goals that they hope to have implemented by the year 2030. They chose that year precisely because of I'm not saying everyone in the UN knows what we're saying, but those who were putting this framework together knew that 2030 would be a very, very powerful window. So the point is that these changes, they don't last forever, that they are intense, they're relatively brief. 15, 20 year cycle is when or window of time is when we're really in the thick of it. And for me, that's good news. For me, it's good news on a number of reasons. First of all, I like knowing that the world just doesn't come apart at the seams for no apparent reason. I like that there is a method, a rhyme, and a reason if we have the wisdom to see it. I like that these changes, they don't last forever. And in their presence, we are changed as people. And we have to look deeply at the way we think and the way we live our lives to find out what works and what doesn't, what's sustainable and what's not. And that's happening although it's not happening in an organized fashion because the powers that be aren't thinking the way that you and I are thinking right now. So in the absence of a really connected, really organized way of thinking, what happens is the systems must break down before they are addressed. So we are addressing, it's kind of like whack-a-mole, you know, you're seeing an economic system break here, and you're seeing an energy system break here, and you're saying, well, let's fix this. And a social system is breaking down, but they're really all a function of this shift. So for me personally, we can't control what's happening in the world around us necessarily as an individual. We have total control as an individual over how we respond to those changes. And our ancestors knew this, Amber, and this is where great levels of mastery come from. And the key, I'll share the key, and then I'm going to invite you to ask me some questions about this. The key is simply this. We are steeped in a story about who we are, where we come from, what our potential is, what our capabilities are. And in that story that comes from our family, our culture, our society, classroom, universities, it comes from governments, it comes from religion, it comes from mainstream media, all of that informs us, tells us who we are, what our capabilities are, what our potential is. Well, we are steeped in a story that has led us to place our sense of well-being on the world around us. Now, when that world is stable, no problem. When that world is stable, when you come home from work and it's a good day on the stock market, and your retirement has gone up, and the money you're saving for your kids' education has gone up, and the kids didn't get in trouble in school, and the dogs didn't eat the couch, and all the bills are paid, and the groceries are, you get the idea. When everything is good, we go, it's a good day. But when that world that we place our sense of well-being upon begins to crack, and it begins to buckle, and it crumbles, if our inner sense of peace and well-being is hinged on that world, now this is where the suffering comes in, because the world is changing. That's the point. And as we place our sovereignty, relinquish our inner sovereignty, and entrust that to a world that is in flux, this is where it gets really scary. And you're seeing this. I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it with members of my family. I'm seeing it with dear friends. I'm seeing it in my community. I'm seeing it in my nation. I'm seeing it on the planet right now. And the words that we're using right now, Amber, this is the language you and I are comfortable with. These words don't work for everyone. So it's not about the words, but it's about the idea that there is a natural rhythm that the world is going through. And the scientific community is so entrenched in the idea that we control and dominate nature. They're trying to stop the changes. They're trying to stop the cycles of climate. They're trying to stop the cycles of economy. And all they're doing is kicking the can down the road, rather than taking the responsibility to go within and say, how can we become the best version of ourselves to embrace the changes? And here's the key. Then I promise I'll stop. So that we can thrive in the world that we find at our doorstep. We're not talking about just surviving until the changes end. Because a lot of people are thinking along those lines. We're talking about thriving in the new world that's emerging. And the only way to do that is to bless the things that no longer serve us and let them go gracefully, to make room emotionally, mentally, psychologically, physically, spiritually, to make room for all of the beautiful new things that now come with the new world that is at our doorstep. So I want to just stop there, and then we'll talk about some specifics.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Greg, that is one of the many things I love about you is that you're a realist, but you're also an optimist. And
I am.
I appreciate that because we have to look at what's going on. I was, back in March, I was happy for the whole mess to go away in 2 weeks so I could get back to my normal life, like everyone, I'm sure. And I had expectations about that. Well, here we are, many months later, in a completely different world. Not completely, but pretty much. And yeah, I've had to look at things that I never thought I would have to look at inside of me.
Sure.
I thought I was doing all that inside of me stuff. That's just my work. But the way the world is and the control that I don't have over it has made me realize more and more that the only one thing I have control over is right here.
Mm.
And I am delighted that that I have that realization, but not everyone does, and they're waiting for things to go back to normal.
One of the things that has really come up for me, because I'm in this with everyone else, we're in this together, um, is I have grown, I've learned to grow more comfortable with the fact that there are things that cannot be known in the moment. Doing what you mentioned Lee Carroll and my dear brothers and sisters, people like Joe Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, Nita Morjani, Lynn McTaggart. I mean, so many of my beloved colleagues and brothers and sisters, yourself, we are accustomed and we took for granted that there are some things uh, that exist with enough certainty that we could plan our lives. And it was very common for us to take calendars and plan, 3 years in advance. And for producers to write big checks, large sums of money to preserve the venues and all of the equipment so that we can come together and have our gatherings. And that's not possible now. And I have had to become comfortable with saying I cannot make those commitments because the parameters that give me the confidence to make those commitments are not in place. I am an optimist, and I'm optimistic because I believe in us. I believe in our humanness. I am a realist, and realistically, this isn't over. Realistically, what I see happening is global structures are attempting to capitalize upon the coronavirus phenomenon. So there's a statement, there's a saying in politics: never let a good crisis go to waste. And I think we're seeing an example of that right now, because what's happening is we are in a global crisis to different degrees in different places. And there are global institutions that are looking for ways to capitalize upon that crisis to enact new policies, new laws, new ways of thinking. So realistically, that's why I sense that we're in the thick of it. It's not over yet. And that's even more of an incentive for me and for people who are asking, what can we do? Because those systems are in flux, they are volatile. It makes sense to expect the unexpected. It makes sense to expect disruptions in services. It makes sense to expect extremes in weather and climate. It makes sense to expect the unexpected. And because of that, it's even a greater opportunity to go within and to claim our sovereignty in body. And that means resilience. And this is where, I'll talk about this a little bit here. I want people to know there is a course, it's called Radical Resilience. That's not why we're doing this. I'm not trying to get people to sign up, but this is so brief. And I want people to know that I'm not skimping on the information. It's just, we have a limited time and there is more available. Resilience means different things, different people. When I was a kid back in, when I was growing up, I was growing up in the 50s and the 60s, and during those times, the idea of resilience, it was pretty brutal. And if you ask some about resilience, their answer would be just suck it up and get over it. That's your resilience. Seriously. I mean, just as a male growing up in a rural community, a very conservative community in northern Missouri, I was just told to man up, suck it up and get over it. Whatever it was, the loss of a friend, the loss of a pet, the loss, you flunk out of school, or you have a fight and you lose, or whatever it is. That's an old idea of resilience, where we bounce back from an unexpected event in our lives. And our ability to do that in the past has been called resilience. So that's one way of thinking. There's another form of resilience that has, it's a new science that's being developed in the Stockholm Resilience Institute. And this is what I address certainly through the course. And it is called adaptive resilience. And adaptive resilience is where you are honest with yourself that your situation has changed. And you think and you live in ways that honestly reflect the situation that you're in, so that you're already prepared for the change. And in that way, you don't have to bounce back, because you have already factored in that those changes can happen. So I'll just give you an example. Adaptive resilience, if the powers that be were honest with us and themselves about climate change, they would know that we're in a cycle of change. We didn't make it. We can't stop it. We're going to see what is called unsettled weather, volatile weather patterns. Traditional resilience is where you try to keep living your life the way you've always lived in the presence of conditions that have changed. Makes no sense. New England here in the United States, perfect example. Every year we get these big storms. They're worsening now because of climate change. That means the ice storms that happen almost every year, that come in, that blanket the region with thick ice. The ice is on the power lines. The power lines become heavy. They break. The telephone poles collapse. Power goes out. People have no heat. They have no refrigeration. They have to use backup power or alternate forms of power. And the authorities act surprised every time it happens. And they try to bounce back by cutting down more trees, building new telephone poles, and putting those power lines up, exposed and vulnerable again. Adaptive resilience for those communities would be to say, hey, those power lines worked in the past, but we are in a time of extremes. We know this is happening. Let's think differently. Let's put the power lines underground, so that no matter how bad the storms are, everybody's got power. It's not so much of a problem then. Think of all the trees we're going to save. Think of all the jobs we create for the people that have to put those hundreds of thousands of miles of power lines underground. So as a community, that's an example of adaptive thinking. So when we talk about resilience, we are talking about the ability to be resilient across multiple domains of the human experience. It's not just about physiological resilience. We have mental resilience. We have psychological resilience. We have spiritual resilience. We have mental, psychological, spiritual, emotional resilience. And we are a combination of all those. So if we want to be successful in our resilience, we've got to take into account these domains that we call our life. And we all know, I mean, you can become biologically resilient. You can eat the right foods, do all the exercise, take all the good supplements. So the body is good, but excuse me, but you still may be experiencing trauma psychologically, or trauma emotionally, because those domains were not addressed in your physical resilience. So this is, for me, Amber, it's an opportunity for high levels of mastery. And, there are different ways of looking at the lockdowns. I know some people bored out of their minds. They have now, I had a friend that emailed me and said, I am at the end of Netflix. So it's like this linear offering of films, and he has reached the end. He said, now what? What am I going to do now? So there's some people that are just biding their time, waiting to go back to whatever it was they were doing in the past. And other people have really looked at this downtime and said, wow, do you know how long it's been since I have had the opportunity to water my plants, twice a week, to be home with my kids, to actually watch. I'll tell you, for me, here's a big one for me. I actually watched the trees go through 3 seasons on my land here in the high desert of northern New Mexico, which is something that I cherish. Because in the past, there have been brief hours. Literally, I would come home from London. I would drive 4 hours up to my land in northern New Mexico. I'd have a 36-hour turnaround, and I'd go back to the airport, and I'd be off somewhere else. And I would go out and look at these trees, and I'd look at the mountains, the same peak as it goes through the seasons, big snow, and then little snow, and then what's left of the glaciers, and then nothing, and then and this year I've gotten to see all of that. It's also an opportunity for us to develop our inner mastery, for us to have consistent diets, and in terms of honoring our bodies with really nourishing food, and to explore these domains in whatever way it makes sense for us. I'm not saying it has to be through my course, but there are a lot of really good people, good authors, good approaches, and everybody's online now. We've got the time to know ourselves. This is the key, to know ourselves in the presence of this adversity. And I believe that when the facts are clear, our choices become obvious. So when the facts of the changes are clear, it makes sense for us what to do. When the facts of our extraordinary potential, Amber, when the facts of this extraordinary potential that we have is what is called soft technology. We begin to look at the body very differently from organs and bones and tissue. We begin to look at cells literally as electrical circuits. They are. Every cell, 0.07 volts of electrical potential. Every cell is a capacitor. Every cell is a resistor. Every cell is a gated circuit. Every cell receives photons of light from the universe. Every cell emits photons of light. We're in communication with this light language. Every cell of our body stores information, it retrieves information, and we regulate. We are made with the ability to self-regulate this internal technology through thoughts, feelings, emotions, beliefs, breath, focus, and that makes us very powerful beings. But nobody tells us that. People don't tell us that. And the high levels of mastery that we've studied from people that we believed were different from us, exception like monks and nuns and yogis and mystics and shamans and healers and curanderos, in the Andes and in the Yucatan and in the Himalayas in Tibet, where I used to take groups back in the old days. Those people were just demonstrating in their lives the potential that lives within each of us. This shutdown has given us the opportunity to become aware and maybe explore and develop and master some of those potentials. And the better we know ourselves, the less we fear change in the world. And the better we know ourselves, the less we fear other people who are different from us, because we're not threatened by them because we have our own personal sovereignty. We know who we are. But here's the most important thing. The better we know ourselves, the less we fear our own power. And I think you probably found this, Amber. This is almost 40 years I've been doing this work in one form or another. And I've asked audiences all over the world through translators and directly in English this question. And I'm amazed at how universal the answer is. Almost universally, we share a common fear of the power that we suspect we harbor within our bodies. For some, it's more conscious than it is with others. Some, it's repressed, but we all sense that we have this great power within us. And I think the fear is that we will abuse this power in some way. It's almost on a genetic level. It's almost in the DNA. And that power is what has been demeaned through many of the religions. We've been taught to repress the power through society and culture. But as we embrace those inner abilities, and what I'm talking about, it's self-regulation, the ability to self-regulate our biology. we're the only form of life that can self-regulate our immune system, for example. Who doesn't want that in the pandemic situation? We're the only form of life that can self-regulate our immune system on demand. We can sit down the moment in time and say, in this moment, I choose to strengthen my immune system. We're the only form of life that can choose to awaken the longevity enzymes within the cells of our bodies. And it's not just about getting older. If you are living to an advanced age, it means that you are healing, that you are regenerating, that you are rejuvenating so that you can reach those advanced ages. We're the only form of life that can do that. We're the only form of life that can access deep states of intuition on demand. When the moment that we choose, no matter what the situation, we're the only form of life that can awaken powers of supercognition, super learning, super memory. And we're the only form of life that can awaken and choose to create resilience on demand to the changes in our world. And that is the kind of mastery that I'm talking about. We have the opportunity to embrace in this time of global shutdowns. So,
Thank you for that, Greg. I agree with you 110%. And once we realize that we have that kind of ability and cognition, we also come face to face with the responsibility of what do we do now? We can't, it's the outside is not going to change us or take care of us. It's this way. It's right here. And if we're used to going outside for our pleasure, for our power, for our to be acknowledged, to be desired, to be held up in the world, and now we have to turn in, that is a whole new way that most people are looking at. Okay, we know that doesn't work. Now we're going to do this. I'm responsible for this. I have to do, I have to. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, well, it means different things, different people. And it's not an act, it's a journey. And I think what we're finding is that this shutdown has given us the opportunity to begin the journey. It's a journey that can continue, it will continue. As the situation in the world progresses, as it changes, there's a time when the lockdowns as we know them will no longer be in place, when they'll end. What happens after that, I don't know. I cannot know with certainty. I have my suspicions and my sense, but I cannot know with certainty. But I know that even through that time, I keep coming back to this. The better we know ourselves, the better equipped we are to deal with what's happening in that world. The less we know ourselves, the more dependent we are upon that world to care for us. And we have been steeped in that story. And there is an element of our society today that is enforcing and reinforcing that story. And unfortunately, they are imposing that story upon very vulnerable young minds and young hearts, telling our young people that they are vulnerable and that the world around them is supposed to take care of them. And when the world doesn't, that world around them has somehow failed them, or that a system of law or governance has somehow failed them. And that incites a sense of injustice and anger within those young. It's actually a hurt. We are living in a world of tremendous hurt right now, Amber, and the hurt is for a lot of reasons. And in my opinion, I think there are a lot of good reasons that we are experiencing hurt. The hurt is not the problem. It's the unresolved hurt. Our hurt is our emotional and our psychological and our biological and our spiritual response to what the world has shown to us. And we all feel the hurt, and it's not right, wrong, good or bad. To acknowledge that we're hurt, you say, yeah, I'm hurt. That's the first step, to be honest. How can we solve the problems if we're not honest about the problems? So the first step in the honesty is to acknowledge what you're feeling. And if you're feeling hurt, yeah, I'm hurt. All right. But here's where we're running into problems in the world, is that we as a society are seldom taught how to reconcile our hurt. And in the presence of unreconciled hurt, we begin to fear. And that fear often is expressed as hate. And we are seeing a tremendous amount of hate in the world. You and I are in the United States of America, and I don't know about you, I'm concerned for our country. I've never seen the country as divided. Even a lot of parallel between now and the 1960s. You know, in the 60s, we had riots in the streets, we had protests, we had political division, we had wars going on, people were being killed, a lot of great music. And even in the presence of that, the hate and the animosity between political parties and what people believe to be true about those parties did not exist, at least in my experience, did not exist at the level that we see it right now. So in the presence of all of that, it becomes really clear why, if we place our sense of well-being upon that system, and that system is fractured, and that system is distorted, and the system is cracking, it's buckling, it's collapsing, if that's where we place our sense of well-being, because we've been conditioned to say that is supposed to take care of me, and it's failing, that is a scary, scary prospect. And this is why I think it's so important, and it's so powerful to be able to take ourselves, to consciously claim our sovereignty across all the domains that I've just described, and to allow that system to go through the gyrations that it's going to go through. It's going to settle out into whatever it's going to settle out into, but it gives us the ability to unplug emotionally, to unplug psychologically, to unplug spiritually, to unplug physically even, and let the system has to go through its changes. I'm looking at the screen right now. I'm on a set filming for an ancient civilization series. And what you're seeing, people are asking what you're seeing. Can you see what I'm pointing to right now? Is a Hindu symbol of actually the trilogy. And the trilogy comes up over and over again. In Christian traditions, it's the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. Or in Hermetic traditions, it's Mother, Father, Child. Native American traditions, it's Earth, sky, and what's in between. In physics, it's the electron, the proton, the neutron. In the Hindu traditions, it is Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and Shiva. Now, we're often taught that Shiva is the destroyer, and a lot of people will fear and demonize Shiva as the destroyer. But when you talk to the people who live these traditions, when I was spending the time in India, they said, no. Shiva doesn't destroy just to destroy. It's not gratuitous destruction. Shiva is the transformer. And sometimes in the process of transforming from one way of being to another, what has been in the past must be destroyed to give way to the new being. So Shiva is the transformer. We are living in the world right now, and some people are seeing it as a world being destroyed. I see it as a world in transformation. And in the process of the transformation, the ways of thinking, the ways of living that are no longer sustainable, they simply cannot exist in this world. So there are people that don't understand that, Amber, and so they are fighting tooth and nail to hold on and prop up the systems that are unsustainable and can no longer serve us. You know, one of the great mentors in my life who I never had the opportunity to meet was Buckminster Fuller. And who was a brilliant philosopher. He was a scientist, he was an architect. He was in my view, he was a spiritual poet through the work that he did. I don't know if he would ever say that about himself. But he said something so powerful, and I come back to it again and again. He said, you're never going to change the world by fighting against the things you don't like. He says, if you want to bring about change, find a new way that works better, and people will follow the new way and let the old way go. And in that way, and that's what he said. So what he was saying is, in that way, you don't have to fight what you don't like. You put your energy into what you choose to experience, what you do like. And if it works, if it's real, if it's valid, people will then begin to follow and support that way. So you didn't have to fight the old way. It just falls away because it's no longer relevant. And I think that is a beautiful example of what's possible for us right now, and our ability to claim our inner sovereignty across all of the domains that we talk about. And it doesn't have to be, formally through resilience, the way I've described it, but our ability to claim our inner sovereignty in the presence of these external changes, and then to be really honest with ourselves about, rather than criticizing what we don't like, what is it that we choose? I see this all the time. I ask audiences, say, who wants a new world? Who wants a better world? Everybody raises their hand. I say, what's that world look like? People don't have a clear vision of what they do want. They just know what they don't want. So I think our job and the potential that lies before us is to have a very clear vision of what we choose to have in our world and in our lives. Put our energy into that rather than putting our energy into the fight that is destroying, it's shredding, it is shattering families and communities, our nation, and to some degree, it's shattering this world. And in my view, it's something that is not necessary. It seems to be a path that we have chosen, but we are free to choose again at any time and to choose a new path with less suffering. And that is what I believe that we're all empowered to do.
That is so insightful, Gregg, and so inspiring. Really, I feel that, you and I think alike, and to have this conversation with you and hear it out loud, what goes on inside. And I hope for many of the people that are listening, they will continue to be inspired by what you've been saying, to look inside and see what it is that we can do about what's happening in us, not to us, but in us, and our response to the world, because really that will also be collective.
Absolutely, Amber. And I don't know, I sense are we getting close to our wrap here? So I want to say something. May I say something? I had a conversation recently that I want to share with our viewers. First of all, I just want to thank everyone. Thank you for sharing a part of your day with us today. Thank you for the life that you're living. Thank you for your courage and your wisdom and your vision, your perseverance and your dedication just to make this the best world possible and to be the best version of yourself that you can be. I was having a conversation with a man not long ago, and he told me that he was recently married, and he asked me if I had any children, and I said no. I think I'd be a good father, but I've just never had the opportunity. It just hasn't worked. And I said, how about you? And what he said to me, he said, my wife and I made a choice. He said, we would never bring a child into the world the way it is today. We would never do that to a child. And I thought about that for a minute. And he said, what do you think? He said, I can see you're thinking about it. And I said, well, I understand what you're saying, but I said, can I share another perspective? He said, yeah. And I said, why would you deny a soul the opportunity to come into the world at such a pivotal moment in the history of our nation, of all nations of this planet, when everything is being rethought and reconsidered, and one life has the potential to change everything and make all the difference in the world? Why would you deny a soul that opportunity? And he said, wow, I never thought of it that way. And then he got a big grin on his face. And I said, well, what's that big grin about? He said, I'm going to go home and make a baby. So I think, as we close this conversation, I think it's good to be realistic, and I think it's good to be optimistic, because we have reasons to be optimistic. Yeah. I believe in us. I believe in our potential. I believe in human soul. I believe in human goodness, and I think it demonstrates itself. There is darkness in the world, and that's part of our world, but the goodness and our innate goodness transcends all of that. And I have seen it time and time and time. It's hard sometimes to acknowledge it, but I've seen it time and again. And I believe that goodness will transcend all the suffering that we're experiencing right now. We just have to give the goodness the opportunity to shine through. And we do that through the choices that we make in our lives. And each of us has the opportunity, and we're being tapped. We are now, and we're about to be tapped even more. We're all going to be asked to make choices in our lives. So the better we know ourselves, the better equipped we are to make those choices in a way that give us the world that we know is possible, and that help us to become the best versions of ourselves. So I just wanted to say that as we close out our time together, Amber.
Well, thank you, Gregg, and thank you for spending this time with me and with everyone else out there, and all of the work that you do in the world, that you continue to evolve this conversation so that we're all can be inspired to,
Mm.
to see the goodness. So I really appreciate that. And I won't be seeing you in January in Boulder. I'm
No,
so
no.
sorry to say, but who knows? Who knows what else?
You know, there's something interesting, Amber. This, we are all now are resorting to this digital communication.
Yeah.
And I think there's a really, and I know it won't always be like this, but there's a really interesting phenomenon that's happening, because I think we're all beginning to sense that we are more than the photons moving around on these computer screens. We are represented in those photons, but there is a palpable connection that is not determined by how far apart we are, how close together we are.
Physically.
My heart is with you, and I'm giving you a big hug, and I love and appreciate you so much. I look forward to our next Boulder. I look forward to them every year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is okay. This is good for now, and thank you for your trust in sharing me with. The truth is, you never know exactly what I'm going to say, so it does take a level of trust, and I appreciate that. Thank you for
Oh,
sharing me with your community.
it's easy. I do trust you, and I trust that this message, along with many, many more of your messages, go out into the world and touch people in a way that continues to help them find that goodness and find their inspiration.
Mm.
Thank you so much, Gregg.
Thanks so much. I look forward to our next.